John looked around. There was no one else in the desert. He was all alone. He did not have a phone signal to call for help. John knew he had to keep walking to find help. He took a sip from the last bottle of water and started to walk. The hot sun was shining on him, and the sand was burning his feet through his shoes. John had a bit of water left, but not enough to last him the whole day. He walked and walked, but he could not find anything or anyone. The desert was empty and endless. There's nothing else as far as eyes could see. John had driven his car through the desert 2 days earlier. That morning, he was awoken by a phone call from his brother. "It's Mom, you'd better come," said John's brother. He jumped out of bed after hearing the news about his mother's illness. John knew he had to hurry. He threw some water on his face and a few clothes into a suitcase. It would take almost a full day of driving to get there, which includes a 5-hour drive through the vast desert. It was in the middle of summer when temperatures can be dangerously high. John had 2 big bottles of water in the car. He made a quick stop to grab some food for the road before entering the desert. A few hours later, the old car made a strange noise before coming to a complete stop. He tried to start his car multiple times, but it didn't respond despite many attempts. He then made a phone call for a roadside service, but there was no signal. John couldn't waste any more time, so he grabbed a few belongings and started to walk, hoping to find another car and hitch a ride. It was still early in the morning, so the weather was tolerable. After he walked for an hour, John came upon a fork in the road. He wasn't familiar with this road, so he took a turn and kept on walking. Hours turned into 2 days and he still hadn't seen a single person. John was extremely dehydrated and exhausted. He sat down to rest under a small, scraggly bush. He took out his phone hoping for a signal, but the battery was dead. He drank some more water, but the bottle was almost empty. He felt distraught and alone. He did not know what to do next. John wished he could find someone to help him. As the day went on, John felt worse. The sun was still shining bright, and the temperature was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. His head hurt, and he felt dizzy. His water was all gone, but he kept walking, hoping to find someone or something to help him. When the sun went down, it got cold in the desert. John shivered and tried to sleep under the tree. He was severely dehydrated and tired. Even though it was cold, his mouth was dry, his face was red with sunburn, and his lips were cracking and in a lot of pain. He knew he was very sick and needed water and help very soon. Just as he was drifting off to sleep, he felt something cool landed on the eyelid. Soon droplets of water ran down his face. Water, at last! John cheered. He opened his mouth wide to try and catch some of it. He was so relieved when the rain poured down heavily on him, but it was short-lived. Within just a few minutes, the rain stopped. The little bit of water he got was barely enough to quench his thirst. The next day, John woke up feeling even worse. He was very weak and could hardly walk. He knew he had to keep going, but he moved very slowly. He felt like he was going to fall down every step he took. He prayed for someone to find him. John couldn't walk anymore. He was just too weak. He knelt down and crawled to the nearest tree for some much-needed shade. He leaned back on its trunk and looked up at the sparse branches. He noticed something moved among the leaves. It was a large vulture that had just landed on the tree. The bird folded its wings and looked down at John with great anticipation. Maybe I'm hallucinating, he thought before passing out. After John awoke, still feeling dizzy and weak, he noticed two more vultures staring at him. This time they were coming closer, only a few feet away on the ground. Startled, he jumped to his feet, gathering every last ounce of strength he's got left, and ran off screaming into the distance. He tripped over a clear glass bottle halfway buried in the sand. He fell to the ground, hitting his face on a rock. Out of fear and anxiety, he screamed at the top of his lungs, hoping someone would hear him. But his voice was too weak. Then he noticed something far off in the distance, about a few miles. A highway. He shouted. He couldn't believe his eyes and kept blinking in disbelief. I'm not going to die. After a few hours of struggle, John finally reached the highway. It was narrow and empty without a car in sight. He sat down on the side of the road to catch his breath before passing out again from exhaustion. It was nightfall and a roaring noise woke him up. He froze in terror, thinking that the roaring was coming from a wild animal ready to attack him. He slowly opened his eyes to face his fear. It was dark, he couldn't see anything but the two little eyes staring at him. Wait a minute, those are... He perked his head up to get a better look. They were car headlights from a distance coming toward him with the engine fiercely roaring. Still lying on the ground, John reached up with his arm, hoping the driver would see him. He gathered every last strength to shout out, "Over here," but barely made a sound. Suddenly, the car stopped and the driver ran out to John. Question 1. Why did John drive through the desert? A. To visit his brother. B. To go see his mother. C. To go hiking in the desert. Question 2. How long would the drive take? A. Almost an hour. B. 3 hours. C. Almost the whole day. Question 3. What did John run away from? A. Vultures. B. Owls. C. A highway. Question 4. What happened the night John slept under a tree? A. A wild animal attacked him. B. It rained briefly. C. He hallucinated about the rain. Question 5. What was the roaring sound coming from the highway? A. A car engine. B. A wild animal. C. Thunder.